Are we ready to start? Okay, so now we come to the sixth, and this will be the last class in this Introduction to Buddhism series. So this class I entitled it, "With the Buddha's Teachings and Today's World," or something like the relevance of the Buddha's teachings to today's world. And there's first a common misunderstanding of Buddhism that it's necessary to straighten out. And sometimes one gets the impression, if one reads just an anthology of Buddhist texts or a sampling of Buddhist discourses, you see again and again that the discourses are addressed, "Oh monks, oh monks, oh monks, here a monk does this, there a monk does that." And you get the impression that Buddhism is entirely a teaching intended for monks, for monastics. But you see, the Buddha made the primary aim, sort of the distinctive, the unique aim of his teaching is enlightenment and liberation. Liberation from samsara, that is the round of repeated birth and death to which ordinary beings are bound by their greed, hatred, and delusion. And so what the Buddha's distinctive discovery was that path of training, the Noble Eightfold Path, that leads to the elimination of greed, hatred, and delusion, and thereby brings liberation from the cycle of birth and death. And to follow that path in its fullness requires, for the most part, a life of renunciation. The Buddha himself, when he was still living in the palace as an aristocrat, when he realized that he wanted to seek liberation, he left the life of the palace, the life of luxury, and went into the forest, put on the saffron robes of an ascetic, and then for 6 years he practiced different types of meditation, different types of austerity in order to reach the final goal of enlightenment. And once he attained the goal, in order to make that path available to others in its fullness, in its completeness, he established a monastic order. In fact, it wasn't so much that the Buddha said, "I'm going to establish a monastic order," but just once he started teaching, those who listened to his teaching, at least some of them, and decided that they wanted to pursue the ultimate goal full time, then made the determination to also follow the Buddha into the homeless life. And so they would come to the Buddha and say, "Please, Venerable, let me go forth into the homeless life under you." And in this way, the Buddha, without the original design of establishing a monastic order, would admit them, take them on as his renunciant disciples. And so in this way, by stages, a monastic order grew and came into being. And through the centuries, that monastic order from some 500 BC, it's existed right up to the present. It's out. I'm often proud to say that it's outlasted the Roman Empire, the Persian Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, so many dynasties of Chinese kings and emperors. It's outlasted, what else? And it still exists today. Okay, so from the fact that the Buddha established a monastic order, and often he spoke the discourses to making sort of the monks and the nuns the primary audience of his discourses, one might get the impression that the Buddha's teaching is essentially a monastic teaching. But I think this would be a misunderstanding. And the way I came to sort of look at the Buddha's teaching, following a traditional formulation, is to say that it is formulated for the purpose of promoting 3 kinds of benefits. So this is a scheme of, or a set of categories that comes down in the classical texts. So when we look at any teaching of the Buddha, we ask, what is that teaching intended to achieve? What is the underlying motivation behind that teaching? What is its purpose? And when we bring up that question, what we could say is that the teachings are intended to promote three kinds of benefits. So one of these I call, or it's called, the benefit in this present life. In Pali it's ditta dhamma, atta or hita. And that means the good that can be realized right here and now. And that includes personal well-being, inner happiness, wholeness, a state of inner mental health, as well as social well-being, promoting harmony between people, promoting peaceful relations between people, promoting just relations between people and within societies and communities. So this is one kind of, you call it a very tangible, concrete, immediately visible benefit that comes from the Buddha's teaching. So even if one puts aside, I would say, any kind of belief in existence beyond this life, and just says, okay, we live this one life here and now, how can we be happy in this life? How can we promote our own well-being and the well-being of our community, family, society? We find many teachings of the Buddha relevant to that goal. And they're always very sensible, very, I say, reasonable teachings. That there's nothing that really requires blind faith in any kind of principle or appealing to any kind of divine being. Please help me, please benefit me or my family. But there are principles that we could actually adopt and put into practice for ourselves and in our relations with others. And we see that they lead to this personal and social well-being and happiness. I'm going to come to some of them as we go along. Okay, the second benefit is what the texts call samparahika hita, which means the benefit pertaining to future lives, to the next life and lives beyond that. And so the Buddha didn't teach only for those who are seeking immediate liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Because most of us, almost all of us, are going to have a future life. We're going to go on from this life to future lives. And so we have to understand what are the principles, the underlying system of laws that govern this process of rebirth. And the basic principles, the system of laws that govern the process, it's entirely an ethical system. So ethics, according to Buddhism, is not something purely subjective, purely created by human beings. But there's a kind of objective moral order that we have to be able to discern, to discover. And one of the accomplishments of the Buddha is to discover that moral order and to teach that order to others. And so the basic principle that underlies this benefit pertaining to future lives is that by behaving ethically, by following codes like the 5 precepts, which we'll come to, the 10 ways of wholesome action, which I took in the class on karma, then one will be creating the conditions, cultivating the causes that lead to a favorable, to a fortunate rebirth in the future. So we want to avoid, we call, an undesirable rebirth, that is a fall into the states of misery and extreme suffering. And we want to secure a happy or fortunate future existence either as a human being or in one or another of the celestial realms, which are really realms of a superior existence. And so the way to achieve a favorable rebirth is by adopting and molding one's life around these basic ethical principles. And so this is not something that requires a life of renunciation, though of course a life of renunciation adopts those principles as a sort of guiding framework. But in one's day-to-day life, one could observe the 5 precepts, the 10 ways of wholesome action, the practice of generosity, compassion for others, and then you could even put in question, I don't know whether there's a life beyond the present one, but if there is a life beyond the present one, those will be the conditions, the causes that lead to a good rebirth and then to happiness in future lives. Okay, and then the Buddha teaches that all existence within this round of rebirths, whether it's life in the human realm, life in the heavenly realms, not to speak of life in the lower realms, all is subject to, eventually, to old age and to death. And so therefore, the ultimate aim for Buddhism is to break free from the cycle of birth and death and to attain that state that we call the deathless, the unconditioned, the unborn, in which there's no more birth, old age, sickness, and death. That is Nibbana. So that's the final and ultimate goal. Okay, and so the attainment of that ultimate goal, that requires the cultivation of those practices like the Noble Eightfold Path in its fullness, the 7 factors of enlightenment. And so those are the practices that the Buddha taught principally for the monks, for monks and nuns, but they're not in any way sort of sealed off with a label on them for monastics only, lay people do not touch. But anybody can learn these teachings and put them into practice in their daily life. For example, in the Noble Eightfold Path, sort of the crown of the Noble Eightfold Path is the practice of right mindfulness, the 7th factor, based upon the previous factors. And so when you take up in your day-to-day life, if you set aside periods for practicing mindfulness of breathing, observation of the feelings, observation of states of mind, then you're practicing right mindfulness. You're practicing that key element in the Noble Eightfold Path, which is also the practice that we monastics take up. So, whether it's lay people or those who have left the household life, the path to liberation is the same. It's just that monastics, we have sort of the benefit of time to devote ourselves more time to the cultivation of the path. Okay, so this is the threefold benefit of the Dhamma. And so it's of benefit no matter what benefit one aims for if you take up the practice, because the Dhamma, it's structured around this principle of causes and results, seeds and fruits. So you want a particular benefit, so you find what are the causes that lead to that benefit. You have the aim, the determination, the aspiration, then you cultivate the causes. And when the causes are cultivated and reach maturity, they'll bring that kind of benefit. Okay, then we see that, again, if we look in the Buddhist discourses, that they're directed towards the achievement both of one's own good and the good of others. And to illustrate this, I included a text, or actually several texts. Is this visible from the back? Okay, so you can see in the back. Yeah, so here the Buddha speaks about 4 kinds of people. So one who is living and practicing neither for his own welfare nor for the welfare of others, one who is practicing for the welfare of others but not for his own welfare, one who is practicing for his own welfare but not for the welfare of others, and one who is practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others. And then of these 4, the one that the Buddha praises the most and sort of sets up as the model is the one who is practicing both for his own welfare and for the welfare of others. And then he illustrates this with the simile that it's like when from the cow comes milk, then from the milk one gets something called curd. It's a delicacy in India and Sri Lanka. Then from the curd comes from the curd comes butter. Then from the butter comes ghee. Do you know what ghee is? Okay. And then from ghee comes something called cream of ghee. It's sort of like the most refined type of ghee. And then that cream of ghee is considered the foremost of all of the products that are derived from the milk of a cow. And so the Buddha says, in the same way, the person practicing both for his own welfare, and for the welfare of others is the foremost, the best, the preeminent, the supreme, and the finest of those 4 persons. Okay, and then what does it mean to practice for the welfare of oneself and for others? Of course, at one level, you could say that there's a way of benefiting oneself and others materially by ensuring that you yourself have enough of the basic material requisites to live comfortably and happily, a secure dwelling place, food, clothing, medical care, access to medical care. In this culture, a vehicle to travel, and other things that one needs, and that one provides for oneself and helps others in one's family obtain. But the Buddha, though he mentions the material benefits, what he lays emphasis on as a spiritual teacher is cultivating the spiritual benefits. And so he formulates and explains how one is practicing for the welfare of oneself and for others, first in one text with reference to eliminating and removing greed, hatred, and delusion. So the person practices to remove his own lust, hatred, and delusion, and then encourages and instructs others to remove lust, hatred, and delusion. So we could say that's the highest way of promoting one's own well-being and the well-being of others. Of course, the complete removal of greed, hatred, and delusion, that is the attainment of Nibbana itself. But then there's a more basic way of promoting the well-being of oneself and others. And that is through the observance of the 5 training rules, also called the 5 precepts. So here we have the text explaining how is a person practicing for his own welfare and the welfare of others. Okay, so a person abstains himself from the destruction of life, from killing, and encourages others to abstain from killing. He abstains from taking what is not given or stealing, from sexual misconduct, adultery, abuse of minors, seduction, and so on, from deliberate false speech, and from the use of intoxicants. So one observes those 5 training principles oneself, and then one encourages and instructs others to observe them. So in that way, one is practicing for one's own well-being by observing them oneself and promoting the well-being of others by teaching others to observe them. And then there's a little text where a monk comes to the Buddha and asks, in what way is a person one of great wisdom? And then the Buddha says, a person of great wisdom doesn't aim at his own harm or at the harm of others or the harm of both, but rather he aims at promoting his own well-being, the well-being of others, the well-being of both, and the welfare of the whole world. So that is a person of great wisdom. Okay, so now I'm laying out something of what we call the framework of Buddha's social thought. And in a way, you could say that Buddha's social thought and guides to social conduct are an extension of the personal training. So when we ask, like, what are the obstacles to social well-being? What is it that causes conflict, violence, destruction in any kind of society? What lies behind all of the different kinds of conflicts and tensions that we find in society? When we really look deeply into it, you could say it's this law, this policy, this regulation. But what lies behind all of this harm are decisions made by human beings. Decisions that might be formulated in terms of policies, adopted as laws, promoted as dictates by dictators, imposed on a population by tyrants. But what underlies all of the harm facing a society are the intentions of human beings, the motivations of human beings, the mindset of human beings. And so to promote a healthy, happy, harmonious, and just society, one has to look into the minds of human beings and transform the ways of thinking of people, to change their attitudes, to change their motivations. And so for this reason, we say that the obstacles to social well-being, the obstacle to social well-being is the prominence of greed, hatred, and delusion as motivations for action. And this greed, hatred, and delusion at the personal level are said to be the roots of suffering. But when we have whole masses of people whose thinking and attitudes and actions are driven by greed, hatred, and delusion, and we put these all together, then we have very powerful destructive forces with destructive impacts on society. And so if we're going to improve the conditions of society, one has to start changing the attitudes of human beings. And that means promoting the removal of greed, hatred, and delusion, and replacing them with their positive counterparts, promoting a culture of, instead of a culture of consumption and competition, promoting a culture of generosity and mutual care, mutual concern. Instead of hatred and violence and discrimination of one group against another, promoting a culture of loving kindness and compassion and justice and partiality. And instead of allowing a culture of delusion to propagate through, I have to say, through the modern mass media, even including things like Facebook and Twitter, with a lot of misinformation, disinformation, conspiracy theories, prejudices and biases just multiplying exponentially to promote a culture of wisdom, even if not the highest wisdom, but clear understanding, reasonable thought, examination to find what is true, what is false, and to be able to distinguish and discriminate the true from the false. instead of grasping upon any kind of rumors that are being spread around and then spreading those rumors to others, leading to intense violence against certain groups. Okay, so the obstacles to social well-being, greed, hatred, and delusion have to be weakened, and the factors of goodness, the good roots, have to be cultivated and developed. And what struck me, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself because this I come towards the end of this presentation, but what really would be the channel for promoting a healthy culture would be the educational system. Like we teach people, the children, reading, writing, arithmetic. But why not have courses and programs in non-religious ethics? Not presenting ethics from the standpoint of any one particular religion, but having them read widely in the best of Christian ethics, Jewish ethics, Buddhist ethics, Hindu ethics, Islamic ethics, the ethics of Plato, Aristotle, some of the great, for children it would have to be formulated in simple terms. But then once they get into high school, probably they could read some of these writings in the original, and this would condition the minds of children to understand what is good, what is bad, and to see the great degree of convergence and agreement between many of these different religious and spiritual traditions. I should also mention, very, very important, the Confucian ethics, which are very, very beautiful, very much in agreement with the Buddha's teachings. Okay, and then also we could look, actually I should take the moral conduct first. So we have the 5 precepts. I want to change the order of this. So we always say that moral conduct and generosity, like those are the preliminary conditions or the foundation, that forms the foundation for the meditative development. So to promote well-being in society, we have the 5 precepts that I already referred to. And this is an interesting sutta which shows how the Buddha derives the 5 precepts from moral reflection. This is in the Samyutta Nikaya. So the Buddha is speaking to a group of householders who have come to see him. And they ask him, they say to him, we're not monks, we can't practice these intensive meditations, so give us a teaching that's applicable to ourselves. And then the Buddha gives this very simple but very clear ethical teaching. So the disciple reflects that I want to live, I don't want to die, I want happiness, I'm averse to suffering. And so if somebody were to take my life or to threaten to take my life, that would not be pleasing to me. And so if I were to take the life of another person, one who wants to live, who doesn't want to die, that would not be pleasing to that person. And so having reflected thus, he himself abstains from the destruction of life. He instructs others to abstain from the destruction of life, and he speaks in praise of abstaining from the destruction of life. And so in that way, the Buddha says that his bodily conduct is purified in 3 respects. Observing, and then out of this same kind of reasoning, he derives the precepts against stealing, sexual misconduct, false speech, and so forth. Okay, so there's 3 respects. One observes the precept oneself, one encourages others to observe it, and then one praises the observance of that precept. And so this is a way of sort of amplifying the effect, the impact of one's own ethical conduct by praising the observance of ethical conduct to others. And there's another sutta or discourse that I didn't include here, in which the Buddha says that one who observes the precept of abstaining from taking life gives safety and security to countless living beings. Because when you take that precept, I will not destroy life, I will not kill, then any other living being can feel safe in one's presence. Even, when mosquitoes come into the room or flies, we don't kill them. And we're still alive. They haven't taken our lives. If there's an annoying fly, sometimes we set aside like a cup as a fly catcher. Instead of using the fly swatter to swat it and kill the fly, we just take the cup when the fly is on the wall, catch it, slip some paper underneath, a cardboard, and then take it outside, let it go. Then it's happy, it's living, and we're happy because we didn't destroy its life. Okay, so we have this aspect of moral behavior with the 5 precepts, and then the other kind of ethical practice that goes along with the precepts is generosity. So Buddhism encourages, instead of this consumerist attitude, this attitude of miserliness, especially in this culture, in this society now where we have people who are multi-millionaires and billionaires, just promoting policies to keep on building up their wealth. So you're not satisfied with 2 billion, you have to get 2 billion, 500 million, then going from 2.5 billion to 4 billion to 6 billion, up and up and up, never really satisfied, and just keeping it for themselves. The Buddha encourages, sort of the basic practice is generosity, to share what one has with others. So he describes the disciple who's living at home, the householder, as one who has a mind free from the stain of miserliness or selfishness, who's generous, open-handed, who delights in giving, who's devoted to charity, and who shares his resources with others. And what one finds when one lives a life of moral behavior and practice of generosity, that it brings delight to the mind, enjoyment or joy. And one can reflect on one's moral behavior, reflect on one's generosity, and it gives rise to great joy and happiness. Because the mind is now sort of breaking down the barriers that separate us from others, that sort of lock us in and isolate us from others. And so it is now building upon a kind of web, because we all live in this web of interconnectedness, interrelatedness, which gets obscured by this egotistic clinging to me and mine. So when one observes moral behavior, one shows concern for the lives and property of others, concern for truth. And when one is practicing generosity, one is sharing with others, building that upon that network of connections. Okay, then as part of the training of the mind to remove greed, hatred, and delusion, we have the practice of right effort and right mindfulness. So this is the core of a Buddhist meditation practice, and it might seem, if we look at it superficially, as something that one is just doing within oneself. Like we say that this is my spiritual practice, my inner cultivation. But this inner cultivation has important implications or ramifications for our relations with others, for the way we participate in our societies. Because as we're practicing right mindfulness, the aim is to, at least part of the aim, is to transform our ways of thinking, to transform our attitudes. So when there arise things like greed, anger, selfishness, jealousy, envy, miserliness, we're seeing them, understanding them, and then transforming them into the attitude of generosity, loving kindness, developing the wholesome qualities. And so even this personal, individual meditation practice has broader social implications. And one set of practices that the Buddha taught, meditation practices, which very directly touch on social relationships. It's a set which is called sometimes it's called the four divine abodes. The Pali expression is Brahmavihara, sometimes called the four immeasurables. We have them here: loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity or impartiality. So loving kindness means the wish to promote the well-being and happiness of others. And so this is actually cultivated as a meditation. And we're going to be doing this during the meditation session this afternoon. So deliberately cultivating thoughts of loving kindness, and through cultivation they become stronger and stronger forces within the mind. So over time, gradually, somebody who can have a mind given to a lot of aversion towards others, anger, easily bears ill will towards others. When one cultivates loving kindness, over time, gradually, that ill will and resentment fall away, and one develops this very beautiful wish that others, even the people hostile to yourself, that they would be well and happy. Then compassion is the wish. It's the quality that makes the heart shake with the suffering of others. And compassion then becomes expressed as the wish that those who are afflicted with suffering be free from suffering. Then altruistic joy, this is rejoicing in the good fortune of others, rejoicing in the good qualities of others. And then what's called equanimity here is, maybe in this context better, impartiality. So looking at everybody equally as equal, without discriminations of favoritism, those I like, those I dislike, but seeing everyone as being essentially the same as oneself. Okay, so these are attitudes, again, that are cultivated through meditation, but through persistent practice, they bring about the change within oneself, and in that way, they change the way one acts within one's community and society. And one of the sort of concrete ways in which the Buddha brought this practice of loving kindness brought this meditative development of loving kindness into actual communal embodiment is a set called the 6 Principles of Cordiality, which he taught to the monastic order. Because even though monks have left the worldly life, the household life, but even in a monastic community, little secret, there can be hostilities, there can be conflicts, there can be, call this, factions forming, this group against that group. And so to counter that, the Buddha taught these 6 principles of cordiality. So one is maintaining bodily acts of loving kindness towards one's fellow monks. That is, acting acting to them with loving kindness through one's actions, like helping if they get sick, bringing them things they need. The junior monks will sweep the living quarters of the elder monks. If a monk has trouble putting on his shoes, the younger monk will put on his shoes and help him take them off. So those are kinds of bodily acts of loving kindness. Then there's verbal acts of loving kindness, speaking gently, politely, respectfully to others. Mental acts of loving kindness, that is, thinking thoughts, loving thoughts towards them, and cultivating loving thoughts. And then sharing whatever gains one makes, like especially on alms round. When the monks go on alms rounds, one monk will get a lot, another monk going to a different place might get a little. So when they come back to the dining hall, then they'll share whatever they've obtained, so everybody gets enough food. Then observing the same code of precepts, and then preserving, upholding the same, what the Buddha calls that view that's noble and emancipating, that leads to the complete destruction of suffering. So these principles, though they're originally taught for the monastic order, but we could see that we could apply them, at least with certain adaptations, in our relations with other people, in our family, community, and that will bring about real positive changes. Okay, then one thing I found to be quite a remarkable feature of the Buddha's teachings, and this impressed me at a very early time, even before I became a monk, when I was just reading the Buddha's teachings on my own, I discovered that, what initially attracted me to Buddhism were these very deep, philosophical teachings and high meditative practices, which I wasn't able to practice, but they were still very impressive, these elevated states of consciousness. But what I discovered is that within the discourse collection, there's remarkable number of discourses by the Buddha given to people living family lives and lives in their community, showing how they can live together happily and harmoniously. Very, very beautiful teachings that the Buddha gives to husband on how to treat his wife, to the wife how to treat her husband, to parents how to bring up children, to children how to look after their parents, and the relationships between friends, between teacher and the students, student and teacher, employer and employees, employees to the employer, and so forth. I think I included one of those discourses, which sums up everything. Yeah, I included this here. It's a sutta or discourse the Buddha gave to a young man whose name was Sigalika. See, one time the Buddha was walking on alms round, and when he came to the village, outside the village, there was a young man who he saw, he was bowing down to each of the 6 directions, bowing to the east, north, west, south, then bowing down to the underworld, and bowing up to the sky. Then the Buddha asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, my father recently passed away, and before he passed away, he told me that I should pay homage to the 6 directions. So I'm honoring the last request of my father." And then the Buddha said, "Well, what you're doing, you're practicing worship of the 6 directions in one way, but that's not the way I teach worshiping the 6 directions." And then the Buddha sort of turned the teaching around by explaining the 6 directions as the relationship between parents and children, husbands and wives, friends and friends, teachers and students, employers and employees, and between the religious and the laity. So I included that there. I'm not going to go into this in detail here. But if you look at that at your own leisure, you'll see that even though some of the principles, of course, are not so relevant today, like that the parents should arrange a suitable marriage for their children. But most of them, if we put a few of those aside, look almost as though they could have been written in the 21st century. Okay, then I have some teachings that are related to the proper role of the government. And even this the Buddha taught, though of course the Buddha framed it against the monarchical system of government, which had risen to dominance during his own time. But what the Buddha tried to do was to set up an ideal of moral leadership for the king. So kings, as the Buddha saw it, or the kingship as the Buddha saw it, did not entitle the king just to the arbitrary exercise of power, just to try to impose his own power on others, to enrich himself and his family, to punish arbitrarily those he doesn't like, to kick out those of his ministers he doesn't like, to send out angry tweets early in the morning. But he sees that kingship entails the responsibility, that the king, the proper ruler, is responsible for promoting the well-being of everybody within his realm. So this is a sutta. Let me get it all. Yeah, so in the sutta, there's the elder king who's about to retire to give up the throne to his son, the young prince. And so the young prince asks his father, what is the duty of a righteous monarch? And then his father replies that the king, the righteous monarch, should rely on the Dhamma. And here the Dhamma doesn't mean the Buddha's teaching as such, but it means this principle of righteousness and truth that lies behind the Buddha's teaching. So relying on the Dhamma, you should provide lawful protection, shelter, and safety for your own dependents, for the Brahmins and householders, for the people living in the towns and the countryside, for ascetics and Brahmins, even for the beasts and birds. Let no crime prevail in your kingdom, and to those who are in need, give wealth. That's very important, that it's the responsibility of the government to ensure that there's no poverty in the country. If we apply this today, we should say that the government has a responsibility to ensure that everybody has a satisfactory standard of living. Okay, and then whatever ascetics and Brahmins there are living in your kingdom, from time to time you should approach them and ask what is wholesome, what is unwholesome, what is blameworthy, what is blameless, what is to be followed, what is not to be followed. And then you should listen to them, and then you should avoid what is unwholesome and do what is wholesome. So that's the duty of a righteous monarch. So now we don't have a monarchical system of government, but we could take these same principles and say that is the responsibility of a government today, to ensure that everybody can live in safety and security, that there's no poverty in the realm, and that everybody is able to have a satisfactory standard of living, peace, and to live a peaceful way of life. And so if we look at some of the problems, I'll just touch on this very briefly, that we face in the world today. I've tried to sort of sum them up just with 4. You could multiply them, but for convenience, just take 4. Persistent wars and militarism, glaring economic inequality and poverty, racial, ethnic, gender, religious violence and discrimination. All of those, you could see, if we take the principles that we've just gone through and apply them, we could see that they provide a solution to these problems. Even something like climate change and its impact and the changing environment, forest wildfires, floods, storms, droughts, and so on. If we understand and apply the principle of cause and effect, we could see the underlying, with wisdom, the underlying causation, and then we see what we have to do to reduce this problem and ensure that future generations can live safely. Okay, so maybe this shall do for some of the study or examination of how the Buddha's teaching applies to our world today. So if we have some questions, please feel welcome to bring them up. And again, don't be shy and hesitant. Okay, Annie?
I just read quickly, and you'll probably elaborate more,
Yep.
in the magazine Tricycle,
Yeah.
where you have an article. And I think that you were trying to address it broadly
Yeah.
in the United Nations, or where was it? In
I was at the Union Theological Seminary.
yes.
Yeah.
And then you said that it's very hard, like Buddhists in general, kind of, they're not as proactive as they could be.
Yeah, yeah.
How can we, and then I think you narrowed it down to where we should be handling some things locally, in small groups, and then
I think if
eventually.
you put the... Okay.
Oh, sorry. Maybe we can handle it in small groups, and then eventually it would converge into a broader.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, it's not in front of me, that's why I'm kind of all over the place with it.
Yeah.
How can, like in small communities, how can we, what can we do as Buddhists in like
Okay.
smaller communities? Like what
Yeah.
exactly does
Yeah.
that look like?
Okay, so the text that appeared in Tricycle, that was a talk that I gave, we had in February of this year. There was a gathering at Union Theological Seminary for the purpose of bringing together socially engaged Buddhists who wanted to form a kind of organization that would serve as a vehicle or a channel for Buddhists to act on principles of moral justice in the political arena. Not to support one party against another party or certain candidates against other candidates, not like a political action committee, but rather to take a stand, to take a position on political and social issues with moral implications. And so the text I gave the closing talk at that gathering, and that was the text of it. And so one thing that I pointed out is that amongst many Buddhists, there's this, and this is the Western Buddhists primarily, not so much the Asian Buddhists, but the Western Buddhists, that to get involved in anything with political implications is, in a way, a detour, a distraction from our quest for meditative development. That often Buddhists sort of look at all of these social tensions and conflicts as just worldly affairs from which we have to detach ourselves and just develop inner peace and happiness. So I criticized that and said we have to use a sense, I call it a sense of Buddhist conscience, taking on a sense of responsibility for the well-being of people in the world. Okay, and so then the way we originally set about this, starting this organization, the original idea was that we would set out at once with a number, I was in conversation with a number of Buddhist leaders in different parts of the US, we were having conversations to form a national Buddhist moral justice coalition. But it turned out to be just too difficult to do it on a national scale at once, because we were sort of spread out in different areas. So we decided to do it to focus on the greater New York area. And so we had this gathering in February, which brought about 150 people there. And out of that, there's been a smaller group of about 30 to 40 people who have been meeting regularly at Union Theological Seminary. We meet on the first Monday of each month at 6:30 p.m. So if anybody wishes to come, they're welcome to come.
Where is that?
Union Theological Seminary is Broadway, and it's 120th Street. Excuse me? Yeah, it's 120th and Broadway. Though in September, because the first Monday is Labor Day, so the meeting will be on Tuesday. Otherwise, it's on Monday evenings.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, and maybe should I send that article to the group? Yeah. Okay, so I'll send it to Kairi and she could share it.
Let's see, I wrote it down so I wouldn't get confused. My
Please
name is
put
Beth.
the microphone to the...
My name is Beth.
But not too close, okay.
The
Beth?
middle way, right?
Beth? Okay.
Okay. What practices in Buddhism can be undertaken to eliminate egocentric clinging,
Yeah.
which you mentioned? Is that meditation or what? That's what I'm personally working on, and I'd like to know.
Oh,
What I
you
can
said what practices
Yes.
can be undertaken to eliminate or to reduce
Yeah,
egocentric...
egocentric clinging and
Okay.
banish the ego.
Okay, so eliminating egocentric clinging and the actual elimination is, very, very high stage. So that's what we're aspiring for. So what we do with our regular practices are attempts to weaken and sort of gradually wear out the egocentric clinging and that sense of ego. So basically all of the practices that we've mentioned are means to that. So generosity is by sharing things with others and giving to worthy charities is a way to at least to start to reduce egocentric clinging. Observing the 5 precepts, but then also cultivating the mind in meditation, because what starts to appear when one tries to cultivate the mind are the various forms of egocentric clinging, taking on thousands of different forms, manifesting in millions of different thoughts. And once one starts recognizing those thoughts and applying that lens of mindfulness to them, then those thoughts no longer control us. But we're able to look into those thoughts, see how they're working, and then just through the examination itself, gradually weakens them. But if one wants to sort of apply a very powerful remedy to egocentric clinging, I think in an earlier talk I spoke about the 5 aggregates. So one looks at oneself as what is actually here when I say I or myself. What is actually, what are those words referring to? We say that they're referring to this combination of bodily form, feeling, perception, volitional activities, and consciousness. And then one reflects on each one of these. You could even do it like a recitation, just going through it each day. The body is not mine, not I, not myself. Feelings are not mine, not I, not myself. Perception, not mine, not I, not myself. The volitional activities, not mine, not I, not myself. Even this consciousness is not mine, not I, not myself. And that will sort of, it's like using sandpaper to sand down a piece of wood. It's like as you're rubbing with the sandpaper, the wood is turning into powder and then blowing away. So that's sort of wearing out the egocentric clinging. But it's not, there shouldn't be just a mechanical repetition, but one should understand the meaning of the words.
Hi.
Yeah.
First things first, I want to say thank you for having this class.
Yeah.
You used the term objective moral order.
Yeah.
Some would question how something could be objective if it's coming from a particular.
Yeah.
So how does that moral order, how does the objectivity
Okay.
come into? Yeah. Do you understand what
Yeah, I understand that. What I would say is that the objectivity follows, how to put this? One way to speak about the way the objectivity follows is that the moral teachings reflect and are grounded in the workings of the law of karma. So suppose we have a culture which says sacrificing animals is good, something which is very valuable, or even that hunting as a sport is good and enjoyable. You know, doesn't matter, you could hunt, you can enjoy yourself, or sacrifice animals. Okay, so that might be the viewpoint dominant in that culture, but the actions grounded in those beliefs, we would say first that the beliefs themselves are wrong views, that they're against the principle of right view. The right view is that killing, taking the life of living beings is unwholesome. Whereas this, even if it's a community, a society, which is saying killing, sacrificing animals is good, it's not just that the different moral judgments are relative and subjective, but the judgment that killing animals is unwholesome and wrong, that judgment is in harmony with the law of karma. So that is a right view. And those who say killing is good would hold a wrong view. And those who act on the basis of that wrong view, we would say are committing wrong action. Whereas those who observe the principle of avoiding killing are observing right action. Wait, take the microphone.
So in other words, those who are killing and sacrificing,
Yeah.
they're determining the karma
Yeah.
through that action.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah. So probably what the most general sort of principle for determining what are the objective ethical standards, what brings harm and suffering to others, we could say as a general rule is unwholesome and against the moral order, and that which brings well-being and happiness to others, to oneself and others, is in accordance with the moral order. Okay, I think we could take one more question, so please take the microphone. Did somebody else have? Okay, then first you go.
This is just jumping off of your sorry, what's your name again? Merritt. His very good question is that you also discussed in a previous class the fact that there are monasteries that do eat meat. And so we see some kind of a conflict here?
Yeah.
Because obviously they're things
Yeah,
being
this
killed.
is a kind of debate that's been gone on for.
I don't mean to debate.
Yeah. You see, strictly what is said is that the moral responsibility for taking life lies with the one who takes the life. So if one receives meat or purchases meat from an animal that's already been killed, one is not responsible for the death of the animal. That is the argument in favor. And then others say, well, you're indirectly responsible. So on this issue, I say let everyone come to their own conclusion. Okay, if there's no further questions, then we'll take a little break. Let's see what time. It's about 3:10 now, so 10-minute break. Then we come back at 3:20 for the meditation session. And then I should mention that I put out some additional booklets for you to take home for your reading. One is by actually myself. It's on the five precepts and 3 refuges. Another is by a German monk named, very excellent, called The Power of Mindfulness. And then a third is by the great Thai meditation master named Ajahn Chah. So the books are on that counter, so please feel welcome to pick them up. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is the second half of this final introduction to Buddhism meditation class. So as Bhante mentioned earlier, we'll be focusing on mainly two very important forms of meditation of those Brahma Viharas, that of metta, loving friendliness, loving kindness, and karuna, compassion. We'll maybe go a little bit into mudita and upekkha, equanimity, sympathetic joy and equanimity, but mainly focusing on metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion, which are very similar practices but also very different ones as well. Metta is usually considered to be developing a sense of friendliness, kindness to other people, considered more to be more passive than the other one. Compassion is that love and the desire to want to help and relieve the sufferings of all beings. You're driven by more action. You're seeing the suffering of other beings and you want to go out and do something about it. Maybe not be able to physically go out and do it, but you develop that internal sense of may all beings be free from harm and danger and troubles. So why do we practice these particular forms of meditation, these Brahma Viharas? Each of the Brahma Viharas combats mental defilements of some sort. Metta is combatant with anger. Compassion combats cruelty, turning a blind eye to the sufferings of the world, turning a blind eye to the troubles of the world and troubles of other people. Mudita, sympathetic joy, combats discontent, not wanting others to have it good, not rejoicing in their goodness and their success in society and their status in society, and not feeling that yours is equal or better. So you don't have that competitive mentality, which leads us to hardships. And equanimity keeps us balanced. It combats aversion, going from an extreme to other extremes. Keeps us focused, keeps us balanced, and helps keep the other three in balance as well. Because if we're developing these states of mind, we can go to extremes. Metta loving friendliness can turn to lust or strong desire. Compassion can be overbearing, can become crushed by our compassion for other beings. You know, we're like, oh, the world is too much, we can't take it anymore, and we lose our balance. Instead of having blinders on, we're overwhelmed and crushed by the situations in society. Sympathetic joy, I don't know how sympathetic joy can be overbearing, but you're just focusing too much on other people. You're not focusing on yourself and your own well-being, and you're working to help better yourself in your situations. You're too worried about others. So equanimity, upekkha, helps balance them all out and helps them grow. You help grow, mature them and grow them and keep them in check. So we practice these to help combat these hindrances, these poor mental states. And these are states of mind that are helpful and beneficial, and they help us feel good and calm and relax the mind. And we use them as gateways to focus the mind and concentrate the mind. They help combat those states of mind that hinder our practice, stop it from growing and maturing. But these are like the watering. They help water the seeds of good mental states that help us, unbind us, unlimit us to grow both spiritually, ethically, morally, meditatively. So I strongly recommend that we practice these forms of meditation because they are very nice and pleasing and very calming. So you'll begin this practice like any other form of meditation, of sitting up nice and straight. Taking a few deep inhales and exhales. You relax the mind and relax the body. Breathing in long, and breathing out long. Breathing in long and breathing out long. And when you're ready, bring your attention to the top of the head, and slowly and systematically scanning the body, letting go of any tensions, tensions in the forehead, the jawline, shoulder blades, chest, abdomen, neck. Just letting all those tensions melt away. If we have tensions in the mind, it tends to show up in the body. If we're not concentrated, if we're not mindful, they tend to just linger and grow and grow. In other words, relaxing the mind, concentrating the mind, being mindful, looking at them, paying attention to them. They're more likely to melt away once we put our attention on them a little bit. Just continue to make your way down to the tips of your toes. When you get to the tips of your toes, you can slowly make your way up, back to the crown of the head. Letting go of any last tensions. Make a general outline of the body. Where are the knees, where are the feet, where the hands are positioned. The straightness of the back, rising and falling of the chest and the abdomen, the tongue in the mouth, tongue pressing against the back of the teeth. The eyelids pressing together. Just another way of grounding the mind in the present moment. If you like, you can take a few more deep inhales and exhales. And then we stop controlling the breathing. We just start breathing naturally. When the body needs to take in oxygen, it'll take in oxygen. When it needs to exhale, it'll exhale on its own. We don't need to control it. We don't need to manipulate it. We don't need to exaggerate the breathing process. All we need to do is focus the mind on the natural breathing. you place the mind on a place where you can experience this most clearly. Be it the nostrils, be it the upper lip, be it the rising and falling of the chest or the abdomen. Where do you feel the breathing most clearly? And that's where we focus the mind. Don't jump around to various different places. Just whichever one stands out to you. Whichever one it is, stay with it. If the mind wanders away, gets lost in thinking, gets lost in imagining, gets lost in worries, this is where you come home to. This is your base of operations. It's where you observe, where you experience the rising and falling. Experience the rising and falling of the chest and abdomen, in-breath and out-breath, thoughts coming and going, feelings in the body, rising and falling. All you need to do right now is focus the mind. You don't need to move around. Just need to watch, observe, let go. When you feel like you're ready, start practicing metta practice. Quietly and gently in your mind. Develop a mind that is full of loving friendliness, kindness. You can do this by generating thoughts like, may all beings be well, happy, and peaceful. May no harm come to them. May they live long and happily. You can use those words, or you can come up with your own words. repeat them over and over again in your head. The more you focus on those words, the more natural they are, the deeper the impact it has on you. You get a warm feeling, a genuine feeling of friendliness, of kindness, swelling within. Let that grow inside you, starting in the mind, and let it radiate off of you. You don't direct it to anyone in particular, just an overall, unbiased, unjudgmental sense of friendliness towards all beings. May all beings be well, happy and peaceful. May no harm come to them. May they live long and happily. Just focus the mind on repeating these thoughts over and over again in the mind, building them up in the mind. The mind wanders away. Just be aware that the mind is wandering away from a thought. And you bring it back to it, starting over again. You can send the thought out to beings in all the different directions, beings in the front direction, beings behind you, beings to your right, beings to your left, beings above, beings below. May all beings in my front direction be well, happy and peaceful. May no harm come to them. May they live long and happily. Repeat it 3 times. More if you like. And then go to your behind, to your right, to your left, to above, below. Send metta thoughts to all beings on the different continents. North America, South America, Central America, Africa, Europe, Asia, Australia, to the whole world. Doesn't matter where they are, who they are, what religion they practice, whether they're good people or bad people. Doesn't matter. You let go of all those distinctions when we practice metta. You can change the thoughts of compassion. Think thoughts similar to, may all beings be freed from suffering. May beings all be free from the suffering and its causes. May all beings be free from war and poverty, social injustice, cruelty. May all beings be free from ruthlessness. You can send it out the same way that you send out metta. Generating these thoughts in the mind over and over again, letting it fill you up, radiating off your body, going to all the directions, the continents, the world. You can even send it to those who need compassion, those who instigate cruelty. May their hearts be softened. May they discover the joys of compassion. Don't need to think about anyone in particular. Just those with cruelty in their heart be freed from cruelty. May their hearts soften. May they experience the joy of compassion. so you can undo your legs now and stretch them out a little bit. Was it nice? I see a lot of nice glowing faces, smiles on your face. It's awesome. So as Bhante mentioned earlier, and I mentioned earlier meditation, we cultivate these states of mind to help weaken negative states of mind that hinder us from growing and progressing spiritually, meditatively. So the more we do it, the more we think these kinds of thoughts, we weaken those ones, and these become our natural states of mind, these peaceful states of mind, these kind states of mind. And they help us, since they are our stronger states of mind, they help us in our daily lives. They're the first ones we go to. They affect the way we act, the way we think, the way we speak, and help us grow in social societies and in our non-meditative lives. And they have this wonderful effect on us, calming us down, relaxing us when we go to meditate. So they encourage, before meditation, you practice metta, particularly metta is the one that's usually strongly encouraged. Do a couple of minutes, 5 minutes of metta practice. Like, may all beings be well, happy and peaceful, words like that. Sit for 5 minutes and do that, and then you can go back to the breath. And more likely to stick on the breath because it's weakened more abrasive states of mind like anger and frustration and all those other kinds of mental hindrances. And it's a good feeling, a nice warm feeling, energizing. So you're not so sleepy or sluggish. The mind's been working, staying focused on these words. So it's more focused, energetic, calming, all that good stuff. So it helps strengthen the meditation experience. So there's any questions? Any questions at all? Don't be shy. Oh my gosh, you guys are such great meditators now. So you don't need me anymore. You got it all figured out. So we got about 5, 6, 7 minutes left or something like that. So if you want, you can do more meditation. That's what you really want, right? You want more. Don't attach. Don't attach. All right. So if you like, we can just do a couple more minutes of meditation, unless there's announcements or anything. Okay, we just do about 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes of meditation. Whichever practice you want to do. You can do metta, you can do karuna, just focusing on the breath, rising, falling of thoughts, feelings, all that good stuff. If you'd much rather just get up and do some walking meditation, you can do it over there. Thank you, everyone.
Hi everyone. Today is our last class, and so Bhante will hand out certification. But some of you may be missing 1 or 2 classes, but it's fine because it's a lifelong practice. It's not only about 6 courses. So if you miss 1 or 2, it's fine. But we have to stick with our, commitment to everyone who participate the whole courses. And also, if you like to have the deposit back, and later after the, by the way, when Bhante call your name to give out your certificate, and would you like to share like a minute, kind of reflection about what you have learned from the class? And after that, and you are welcome to come to the desk and then have your deposit back, okay? All right.
Okay, before I give out, excuse me, before I give out the certificates, I should just mention that, some people have asked how they could continue with their study and practice of Buddhism. So I had sent out, along with the announcement about this class, a reading list of about 10 selected books. So that I think will help you to get a start in continuing your reading in Buddhism. And I also put on that list, there are a number of websites that have a lot of material on Buddhist teachings that you could easily access. And then you can choose, there's so much on the internet, both on websites and on YouTube, that you could be overwhelmed by the amount of material. Here at the monastery, I was thinking what we could do. You see, during the 3 months of the winter, we don't have any programs at the monastery because the roads are often icy and it's not the time for activity. So I think in the spring, probably starting in April, we could have another course, not an introduction course, but this would be for those who have completed the introduction, or those who maybe, it won't be a prerequisite to have completed this course, but it would be going a little deeper sort of into a more detailed examination of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So we could have another 6-week course on the Eightfold Path, starting April to the middle of May. Up until then, I have a regular Saturday morning class that I mentioned already. The class is held almost every Saturday. From 9, we have a group meditation from 9 to 9:50. It's a straight 50-minute sitting. So if you have difficulty with the full sitting, you can get up and do a little walking meditation and sit again. And then we have a Suta class based on the Discourses of the Buddha from 10 to about 11:20. And even though this class has been going on for some time, but the material is not so deep and difficult. So even if you're coming in from an introduction to Buddhism class, you could pretty much pick up what's going on. And the class is based on a text called the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha, which jumps from topic to topic, so it's not unfolding in a systematic way. So wherever you come in, you can pick up and just continue. And the material, if you go to the website of the Buddhist Association, BAUS, you'll see the announcement about that class, and then if you click on that, then you get links to the schedule and the reading material. Okay, and then November there'll be a 10-day meditation retreat conducted by a monk originally from the Czech Republic. If you haven't done a meditation retreat before, I have to say, I'm a little hesitant to recommend a 10-day retreat. But if you've done like weekend retreats or 5-day retreats or week retreats before, then I think you could enter into the 10-day retreat. I think you'll find this. I'm not sure if it's up on the BAUS website yet, but it should be coming up very soon. Okay, so now for those people who have taken who've attended all of the 6 classes, I'm really sorry for those who didn't manage to make all six classes, but we have certificates of completion. And so I think they're not arranged in any particular order, so I just mentioned Colin Morrison. And then if you want to say something about an impression, you can. If you feel shy, you don't want to say, you don't. Okay. Yufin Sri Kumbang. Yeah, I think I know who she is, but maybe she's not here right now. Xiao Yan Ho. Okay, congratulations. If you want to say. Okay.
I didn't have any previous experience with Buddhism, so this is my first experience. I work as a psychologist, so a lot of what I know has been through the practice of mindfulness, through that application, and so I really appreciated this context and everything that you taught us over these past 6 weeks. So I will definitely take this, and I'm excited to deepen my knowledge and my own practice. Thank you.
Wadi or Wadi Sanchez? Is it pronounced Wadi or Wadi? Wadi. Okay, congratulations. Do you want to say something? Peter D'Amico? D'Amico? Okay, congratulations. Did you want to say something? Everybody's so shy. Paula Del Santo. Okay, good.
I'm too new to Buddhism. I didn't know anything about it, and I've worked always in large corporations, so this really broadened my mind a lot, and I'm looking forward to reading more, and I thank you for giving the course.
Patrick Crotty. Nancy Clark. Did you want to say a word?
Just a bit. Yes, I enjoyed this very, very much. Just to spend 2 hours with people who are all in concert about the way to live life is really beautiful to me. Thank you very much.
Merritt Crawford. Okay. Did you want to say a word?
Yeah, I've never miss a chance to get on the mic, right? Yeah, thank you. Real basically, Buddhism is something I've always had an interest in from afar, and the opportunity presented itself, and I'm grateful. And it's instrumental, I guess, in helping me try to practice principles that I want to practice in my life. And so I'm grateful for that. Thank you very much.
Elizabeth Rodriguez. Did you want to say? Okay. Laura Parker Bay. want to say something?
Thank you, and thank you. I have never had the opportunity to have a formal spiritual lessons in my life, and this actually gave me some openings for me to practice what you have given us in lessons, so I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Kim Mendes. Did you want to say? Okay.
I just want to say thank you, and I'm very grateful to be here and to learn about this spiritual path that, we're continuing on together, and it was great to meet all of you. So, thank you.
Catherine McLaughlin.
This made my summer. It really was just terrific. And what I found most helpful is there's a lot out there, a lot of books, a lot of apps, a lot of different meditations. And I just so appreciated coming to this monastery and really learning about the Buddhist teachings from the texts. Because you can't go wrong, because it's the foundation. And of course, you were all really great too. This was like a really no drama class, which I really appreciate.
What is a drama class like?
Lots of.
I don't have that much experience with. Juliet Nolta. Okay. John Hallett. Did you want to say something?
I just want to thank you and the other monks for offering this wonderful class that got me really interested in Buddhism, and I've learned so much. And again, thank you for offering this. This is so very nice. Thank you.
John Mulaney. Did you? Okay. Jennifer Danchev. Did you? Okay. Jackie Mattioli. Did you want to?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to both of you. I've been walking a really interesting spiritual journey for the past year and a half, and I have been practicing Reiki, and I've become a Reiki master. In all of my learnings and readings throughout Reiki, Buddhism comes up so very often. And I was so curious about it, and this really gave me the opportunity to explore that. I appreciate and I'm so grateful for all of the meditation learning. It has really improved my life in so many ways. I'm able to meditate for longer every day, a couple times a day, and it's just been a blessing. So thank you.
Elizabeth Corliss Hallett. Did you want to say?
Yeah, just something. I guess this is getting repetitive, but I just want to thank you all for the generosity, and thank you, librarian. These wonderful books, I'm just bowled over by the generosity of the Buddhist organization. Bow, I guess, right?
That was it. And Christiane Romau. Is that correct pronunciation? Yes. Okay. Okay. Did you want to? Okay. I think that's... I feel a little sad that some didn't get their certificate, but that was like sort of the requirement was to attend all 6 classes, so if somebody missed. Don't really feel deprived, because what's important in Buddhism is not getting a certificate. Okay, so this is the end of the class and the end of the series, but again, I hope that you've learned things valuable that you can adopt and put into practice in your life. That's the most important thing in Buddhism. It's, we always use the expression, it's the Buddhist path. So it's a path that means a set of practices that you adopt into your life, that you cultivate day by day, in order to transform your life for the better, to make you more happy, peaceful, tranquil, wise inside, and then to be able to act with greater kindness, compassion, in relation to others, to benefit oneself, to benefit others. And so, again, please feel welcome always to attend any of the functions or the events that are taking place here at the Zhuangyan Monastery. Again, anybody is welcome to attend my Saturday morning class, to attend any of the retreats that will be held here. And as I said, I hope to see you again when we have the class or the series of classes in the spring. Okay, so thank you. Thank you all. Did Kaida, you have a... And we have to thank Kaidi for taking care of all the arrangements here. And Jason has been videographing all of the talks. Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay, I also want to thank you that I have so much joy just, helping you, having to know Buddhism and Bhante, they are here. It's a very rare opportunity. We don't know if we have another class in the future, so you are the luckiest one. Don't forget your deposit, okay? Okay, if you want to make donations, this is the box for teachers, and that's the box for the facility of the libraries. And then if you want the receipt, please let me know. I will give you a receipt. Okay.